All right, very good. So I will quickly introduce our speaker for this tech talk and our topic as well. So it's called A Very Brief History of Theatrical Lighting. The idea, again, is that this is a very high-level overview with the thought that maybe if this is something that's helpful, we can have more of a fully fleshed out event to dig into it a little bit more. So Jared Canada is our speaker. Jared is a member of the IES. He serves Denver locally on the Brilliance Awards board and nationally also on the IES Performance and Assembly Lighting Committee. He has worked in the theatrical industrial complex for his entire career, but no, he's no longer imprisoned in his black clothes backstage. From building sets and hanging lights in high school theaters to designing large-scale control systems for NFL, MLS, and MLB stadiums, Jared's career has run the gamut of what is possible as a theater technician. He's now a project manager for Digital Dots, which is a software and systems integration company based in Southern California. And he's working largely in museum lighting, performing arts centers, and other highly custom lighting control systems. Without further ado, I will hand it off to Jared. Take it away.
Hey y'all. I am actually at my parents' house in West Tennessee right now, so I'm hoping that their internet stays stable. They're way out in the country. So I grew up way out in the country. I have this love of taking things apart and putting them back together, so I always figure out how stuff works, and I naturally fell into theater. But I uh, I went to undergrad and got a undergrad degree in music and a graduate degree in theater, so I am wildly employable. I am used to doing these presentations in front of an audience, and as much as you know, don't want to break the rules or anything, if you guys want to shout out a question or throw a laugh in there once in a while, that might help me get through it. But anyway, without further ado, this is a very, very brief history of theatrical lighting. Brian told me I need to keep this under half an hour, so the first time I did this presentation, it was an hour and a half, but that was a lot of people asking questions and in person and all that. So we're gonna get through it as best we can, and hopefully you guys will have some questions towards the end. So if we're talking about lighting, when we talk about theater, we start with Greek and Roman theater because that's where it all originates, and they all had outdoor theaters. So just like what you're seeing in that picture right there is an outdoor arena theater, and they only had sunlight. So if the sun went down, they didn't have theater, and that was it. That you could manipulate the sun to be a sunset effect or a sunrise effect depending on what time you started your show, and that's pretty much the lighting design you got out of that. But from there, we went on to candles. And again, I am extremely irreverent when I do presentations because nothing I hate more than a boring PowerPoint and just somebody reading the PowerPoint. So it's always silly when I do one. So anyway, we moved from Greek and Roman theater and outdoor in the sunlight into candles. And boy, did candles have fire, but don't yell fire in a theater. That's not a great idea. Sometimes it's illegal. In Italy in 1580 to 1620, we started using candles in various indoor theaters. England in the 1600s, we had them in private, fancy private theaters. Uh, England in the 1600s, we were, oh, sorry, I said that way. In England in the 1660s, reintroduced in the English Restoration period. They had candles in the chandeliers and the footlights. What's a footlight, you might ask? A footlight is something down at the bottom at the front of the stage that's going to cast light kind of up at an angle towards you. They look really terrible. But at that point, that's the only thing they had. They had chandeliers over the stage, as you can see in this really terrible image. They had chandeliers over the stage and they had footlights down on the front of the stage. And then they had ladders in the wings behind the wing panels. So on that stage, you can kind of see there's some panels that divide the stage up a little bit. When we talk about stage machinery and stage mechanics, we would essentially put these panels on the sides of the stage and contract them on and off to make the stage smaller or larger, or have different pieces of scenery on them that come on and off, something like that. So you can change the setting, the location, that kind of thing. And in between those panels, they would hang a ladder, what looks like a literal ladder, from the ceiling above, and they'd have all these candles on it. And so the candles would illuminate through the wing panels onto the stage. It's a pretty cool effect. A lot of people actually still use those in various shows. Um, so from there, we went on to beautiful oil lamps. They were more fire, they were brighter, they were better, but they still definitely burnt the building down. Real good. We're burning the building down. Oil lamps were developed in the late 1700s and virtually the same position as candles when we were talking about where they go in the theater. They hadn't really invented new places. If you're looking at the front of that stage, you're seeing oil lamps with reflectors in front of them, and those are footlights. They, again, always look terrible. Don't use footlights, friends. We moved from there to gas lamps. Gas lamps, super smoky, a lot of fire. We're really burning the building down now. You put gas lamps on a stage with people and scenery, and there's curtains, and it's going to catch on fire. So we got to be careful about that. But 1816, the first gas lighting system ever is installed in Philadelphia. 1817, gas lamps into London's Drury Lane and Covent Garden theaters. 1820s, gas lamps have made it to pretty much everywhere in the world. 1840s, gas lamps are widely accepted in theater. And the gas table, which is a control board, what did you say, Canada? That makes its first appearance. A gas table, which we would roughly equate to a light board at this point, would be a chunk of something that has valves on it, and so they're controlling the various positions in the theater, so they can kind of produce lighting effects at this point. Finally, instead of just being on, they can change the lighting intensity. It's pretty cool. We've moved into new mounting positions, so we still got the gross footlights that look terrible. We've got border lights. If you're looking at that image up there, the borders are going to be the curtains that go across the stage at the top. So somebody would have put a pipe with gas lamps all the way across the top of that thing, and so that kind of illuminates down over the top of the stage. Just another new position that we still use those. And I love this image, which is hilarious. So if you guys read that one, it makes me laugh every time. More gas lamp follies in the late 1850s were in Stockholm's Royal Theatre. They had 562 gas burners on a stage, again, with people, with machinery, with curtains. I'm shocked that it didn't burn down as soon as they lit it. 66 burners in the footlights, 8 sets of 9 burners in the wings, 8 border lights with 44 burners each, and 72 more lights somewhere else. I mean, just imagine 562 gas lamps on a stage. It's kind of crazy, but really cool stuff. I mean, this is where we started. So from there, we're moving into more specific fixtures. In 1826, the limelight was developed. Yes, the limelight is an actual fixture. If you want to read that from the source of all knowledge, our lovely friend Wikipedia, this is literally copied and pasted. The limelight is a type of stage lighting once used in theaters and music halls. So essentially, it's a can or a cylinder of quicklime, which is why it's called the limelight. And it could be heated to nearly 5,000 degrees before it melted. And it put off a mixture of kind of incandescence and candloluminescence that produced light. They're insanely bright, but they don't look green. So the limelight is not a green thing. It's just called that because it's got lime in it. So people still in the public eye, known as being in the limelight. These were used quite a bit up until the 1890s when they began to be replaced by one of my favorite things in the world, arc lamps. Arc lamps are really, really cool devices. This is just like a literal welding arc going across 2 contact points. There are still arc lamps. Fixtures are still made with arc lamps. They still produce these for very high intensity discharge lamps. So in 1849, the arc lamps were used to create a sunrise effect, Paris Opera. I'm not really sure how that worked because you can't dim arc lamps really. They're just on. Carbon arc follow spots are used up into the 1990s when they're replaced by other high intensity discharge sources. So now we have really high powered LEDs that we can do follow spots with. We also use xenon arc lamps and other types of arc lamps. Carbon arc follow spots are really cool because they had an electrode on one end and a kind of pencil shaped piece of carbon that rotated. And as it rotated, it screwed closer to the electrode because as the arc was formed between the 2 pieces, it would burn off the carbon. So the carbon would advance as the lamp burned. They're really cool. I've seen them operate before. It's pretty awesome. But what's a follow spot, you ask? A follow spot's likely what you think of when I say a spotlight. The most famous of those was the Strong Super Trooper, a really big giant follow spot that has been used for years and years and years in all sorts of arenas and stadiums and all kinds of big long throw kind of event centers, that kind of thing. And in 1980, of course, ABBA memorializes the Super Trooper in song. And of course, right now, tonight the Super Trooper lights are gonna blind me. I'll stop. It's fine. I just like to memorialize that one. It's so good. You can't get upset when somebody's singing Super. It's great. And from there, we're moving to electric lights. A lot less fire with electric lights. You still get some fire with electric lights, but not as much as the gas burners. In 1878, Joseph Wilson Swan patents the world's first incandescent lamp, and then Thomas Edison does it the year later. They actually entered into a partnership, so they had a joint patent on electric lamps, and they made a kind of a mass-producible electric lamp with their patents. 1881, the Savoy Theater installs the first electric lighting system. There were 824 16 candle power lamps on the stage. What's a candle power, you might ask? A candle power is what the illuminance of a single candle looks like 12 inches from a white source of essentially paper. So that's basically one candle power is virtually the same as a candela. Candle power is a fraction a little bit less than a candela. But um, candela and candle power are interchangeable mostly. Candle power pretty much is only used now in like flashlights for some reason. I'm really not sure why. If somebody has the answer to that one, let me know. But that's pretty much the only place anybody uses candle power anymore. But anyway, 824 16 candle power lamps on the stage, and an additional 334 lighting the auditorium. That's a lot of electric lights, really kind of dim electric lights, if we're being honest, but that's a lot of them. In 1882, the Bijou Theater in Boston is the first American theater to install electric lamps. And by the 1890s, most modern theaters have switched to electric lights. They're still kind of crappy looking, though. They just kind of bare bulbs everywhere, and they're not really that great. The mounting positions, again, are largely the same as candles and gas. So we haven't gotten really anything new or exciting at this point. With the advent of electric lighting came the advent of dimmers because we needed to control those. So in 1903, the Kliegel brothers come up a lot when we talk about stage lighting. They installed electrical lighting system with 96 resistance dimmers and 20 extra for the house lights at the Met in New York. Why is it 96 dimmers? I've heard so many stories about why it's 96 dimmers. Because even now, every theatrical power system is going to be in like multiples of 96 essentially. So the real reasons that we do it now, at least, are because we like to have balanced phases of power. So we do this in multiples of 3. So 6, 12, 24, 48, 96, 192. That gives us a fully balanced 3-phase power set, right? So if you have 6 dimmers in a dimmer panel, then you have 2 dimmers per phase, and everybody's really nice and happy and balanced, ideally. Why did Kliegel run 96 dimmers for the stage and 20 for the house lights? I have no idea. 20 does not balance into 3 very easily. So who knows? But that's what they did. From there, we're talking about electric spotlights, right? So focused, a lot brighter, less fire than before. Trust me, you can still set stuff off on fire with an electric spotlight. I have maybe done it. I won't talk too much about that though. 1907, GE introduces a 500-watt lamp. So it's pretty quick how we got to high power lamps from there. 1913, the Kliegel brothers, yet again.
But anyway, on our phone call, she just said.
Oh, Annalise is talking. And then in 1913, the Kliegel brothers again market the number 60, a 5-inch spotlight built around a 100 candle power lamp. 1913, we've gone up to a 1,000-watt lamp, which is just wild to me. In the 1920s, we come out with 5-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch plano convex lenses for plano convex spotlights. So what's a plano convex? Yada, yada, yada. Hopefully you guys know this because you're all lighting design professionals, but a plano convex lens is a plane flat on one side and a convex on the other side, just like you see in the image there. And so by manipulating the source or manipulating the location of the lens, you can manipulate what the beam spread on these lenses looks like. So at a certain point, they're parallel. When you get them closer to the lamp or the focal point, we have diverging rays. When you get them farther away, they're converging rays. So that's how we got where we are with spotlights. Spotlights using 1,000-watt lamps start to replace limelights and carbon arcs, which makes me sad because I love carbon arcs so much. They're just so cool. And then in 1929, those damn Kliegel brothers again, they introduced my favorite theatrical fixture, which is the Fresnel lens spotlight. What's a Fresnel lens, you might ask? I'll tell you what a Fresnel lens is if you don't know. A Fresnel lens is a stepped plano convex lens. So if you're looking at that diagram, if you look to the left side, you can see what would appear to be in those dashed lines, the convex part of a plano convex lens. So Fresnel lenses were developed in an effort to better focus and control light in specifically lighthouses. To use higher output lamps and focus these better, they needed a bigger lens. But the problem with bigger plano convex lenses are they're really, really, really heavy because it's a giant chunk of glass for a lens that big. And also at the time, glass making technology couldn't really produce a lens that big. There were too many impurities in the glass. They get bubbles in it, stuff like that. It was just super heavy to work with in the glass manufacturing facilities. And they cool at different rates. So as it's thinner on the outside and thicker in the middle, they cool differently. So as it's cooling, when glass cools at different rates like that, it causes stress fractures. And it's just basically not really possible to build a lens like that. So they developed the Fresnel lens. It's a nice stepped lens like that with those concentric circles. And it's essentially just kind of flat all the way across. But the Fresnel lens is widely popular even today in film and TV applications because Fresnel fixtures put out a really nice bright center candle power beam, and then it kind of fades off on the edges and it looks really nice. So you can blend the lights together when you're on a film set, because the way that cameras function, you need to have nice even blending of light. But I love Fresnels because they just look pretty. More electric lights. Try to stick with me. Those damn Kliegel brothers, again in 1933, and Century introduced the ellipsoidal reflector spotlight. What's an ellipsoidal reflector spotlight, you might ask? There is an source in the middle of the spotlight, and there's an elliptical reflector behind it. So that reflector converges the light at all points around the lamp and sends it to a focal point in the lens. And so we come up with a more efficient way of spotlighting, more efficient than the Fresnel, more efficient than just a plano convex lens sitting in front of a lamp. So an ellipsoidal reflector spotlight is commonly referred to as an ERS. You'll keep hearing me say ERS as I go on, but the two ones that came out in 1933 were the Kliegel brothers Klieg light, which became a term kind of like Xerox or Kleenex back in the day on film and TV sets. So people for a long time referred to any light on a movie set as a Klieg light because it was a spotlight. Kliegel brothers was the first one. They just called them Klieg lights. Contrary to that, in theater, people referred to them as Licos. This is the Century Lico light. Same basic idea, an ellipsoidal reflector in the back and a lens in the front. These had Fresnel lenses in them. They kind of all had Fresnel lenses in them this time. But this is the advent of what we now use as spotlights most of the time. So the Lico light was another kind of Kleenex Xerox thing. People still, I meet people on a fairly regular basis that still say, "Hey, go grab me that Lico over there." They haven't made Lico lights in like 40 years, but still people say it. From there in 1971, Altman Lighting, who's now Denver based, introduces the 360Q, also known as the 6x9 or the 6x12, et cetera, et cetera. That was the width of the lens and the focal length of the barrel that they were using on those those fixtures. If you notice on those three fixtures you can see right now, they have kind of a 45-degree plug mounted on the back of them. That's actually where the lamp housing in the burner base is. That's called an axial mounted lamp. So the lamp is inside the reflector at a 45-degree angle. And the idea was that the axially mounted lamp would basically lessen the heat strain on the reflector and maybe not cause it to break so much because the heat escapes out the top of that fixture. Did it work? Nah, sort of not. They still broke the reflectors, but they kind of all do that. So what are you going to do? In the 1970s, Lee Colortran introduces this big guy. This is a 1,000-watt ERS that A, gets hot enough to melt its own paint off, and B, sends as much light out the back of it as it does out the front. It's a really inefficient fixture. That kind of square thing in the back there, where kind of around the burner base, there was a vent back there, and it would illuminate because of the reflection coming out of the lenses and everything. It would shoot light out the back of it. So if you had like 40 of those on a catwalk, you'd just like light up the back of the ceiling. It was really wild. It was fun to see. Really, really kind of, those were really popular lights and lots of people still use them, but they're really, really inefficient. In 1992, ETC introduces this guy. It's the Source 4 ERS. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's the same concept. Ellipsoidal reflector in the back, burner and a lamp in the middle of that reflector. Shoots through a couple of lenses. Really nice fixture. These are wildly, wildly popular. In 1995, we're going to shift gears a little bit. ETC introduces the source for PAR. So what's a PAR, you might ask? A PAR is a parabolic aluminized reflector. All of y'all probably use PARs in your daily work. PARs are based on the PAR scale, right? So parabolic aluminized reflector, scale of, measured in eighths of an inch. So PAR 38, PAR 16, PAR 20, PAR 64, PAR 56, those are all eighths of an inch. So PAR 64 is 64 eighths of an inch, which means it's 8 inches wide. Isn't that fun to know? So PAR 64s look like this. This is a old school stage light that people used for years and years and years and years and years. These got used outdoors all the time because there's nothing to them. It's just a big like car headlight inside of that can. It does have a parabolic aluminized reflector inside the light, and there's a lens in front of the lamp. But the thing about it is it's a sealed single unit. And so what happens is if you wanted to produce a different spread of beam on one of these fixtures, you would have to take that whole lamp out and put a new whole lamp in. On the other hand, that ETC source for PAR that you're seeing down there has the reflector mounted in the fixture body, the lamp mounted inside that reflector, and that lens on the front is removable. So you can take the lens out and switch it out with different beam spreads of lenses. It was kind of revolutionary, and they sold 1 million of those things too. So anyway, would you like to hear a little bit more about the Source 4 lamp? I'm sure you would. We're going to talk about it. So ETC Source 4 is, I love to call it God's chosen fixture. The wordage here, direct from Wikipedia again, ETC took advances in lamp and reflector technology to increase luminous output with less wattage. What does that mean? There's a guy named Dave Cunningham. He's still around. He's a nice dude. He's really smart. He invented a whole lot of things that ETC licensed for their products. He invented the Source 4 lamp. The lamp consumes 750 watts of energy and puts out the equivalent of a 1,000-watt lamp. So this lamp has 4 filament strands inside of its envelope glass. You can see them right there, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very, very efficient. And with this more compact filament, the light energy produces better focused in the reflector and therefore outputs more lumens, which is what we like more lumens with less power. So ETC still makes Source 4 ERSs and Source 4 PARs. They're one of the few theatrical fixture manufacturers that still make incandescent fixtures. They are still wildly popular. They are still used all over like London's West End, all over Broadway, in LA, in New York, in Chicago, all of the places, all of the people still use these. You can still buy these lamps. They're not going to go away anytime soon. Even with LED technology bouncing up as much as it has in the last 10, 15, 20 years, we still can't get rid of incandescent lamps. Even with all of the legislation going through, we still get variances for theatrical lighting because there's just not an equivalency to this. They're frighteningly expensive fixtures and they produce really pretty light, but not everybody can afford to do that. And it would be the collapse of an industry essentially. But anyway, there's multiple variations of this lamp. Oh, I missed this part. This is a cool part. As of 2017, because I haven't seen any updates since then, ETC had manufactured and sold 3.5 million Source 4 ERSs. I have no idea how many PARs they've sold, but it's likely about the same. But that's a lot of fixtures. Anyway, multiple variations of this specific lamp. The original was a 750 watt unit, but since then, manufacturers have made 575 watt and 375 watt lamps. And all of those in long life, super long life, 115 volts, 120 volts, depending on where you are. All of these things kind of coagulate into the Source 4. But all of those are varying prices and varying lead times and all that. But you can still get them. They're widely popular. Why did we go down to 575 watts? That's kind of an odd number to get to. But if you think about 4 575 watt lamps on one dimmer, that's 2,300 watts, which is just under our max of 2,400 watts on single 20 amp dimmer. Most of y'all, if you're engineers and you're doing lighting calcs and stuff, you guys derate pretty much everything 20%. So the funny thing about theatrical dimming equipment and theatrical power equipment is it's typically not derated. When you see a 20 amp dimmer, it will hold 20 full amps of power. I've actually seen EPC dimmers hold more than 20 amps for quite a long time. They get really hot, but they'll do it. And a lot of times we put in big installations like stadiums and arenas and stuff like that, we put in really big power distribution centers for stage lighting and for audio and stuff like that when they have big concert tours come in. And when you see a disconnect that's labeled at 800 amps, it's going to get loaded to 800 amps. It's not going to get loaded to 600 or whatever it is, it's going to get fully loaded. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're designing theatrical power systems. So all of that stuff is kind of a history of lighting fixtures. And we go from lighting fixtures into why are we talking about this? It's kind of like theatrical lighting design, and why do you care about it? Essentially, because theatrical lighting design is the precursor to what you lighting designers do now. You want to make things look interesting. You want to make things look exciting with color, with drama, with whatever it is that you're trying to affect from the lighting in a space or on a piece of art or whatever it is. So when we talk about theatrical lighting design, we have to talk about a guy named Stanley McCandless. And if you've ever heard of Stanley McCandless, he is probably the most famous of the lighting designers of, I don't know, the last 100 years or something ridiculous like that. He taught at Yale in the drama department from the late 20s up through the mid 60s. He retired, I think, in 1964 as professor emeritus. He wrote a whole bunch of books and developed lots and lots of lighting design techniques that we still use today, which have, like I said, moved into the commercial lighting industry. I mean, you guys use this whether you know it or not, because this is what works. So Stanley McCandless's design principles are based around subjects on a stage and locations of lighting positions that are accessible to us in the theater. So if we talk about McCandless lighting design, it looks like this. So if you looking at the left side, our top view there, ideally we have 3 lights. That's the minimum you can do for a quote unquote McCandless design plot. So you have a front light on both sides of your subject. They're at roughly 45 degrees from your subject. And then there's a backlight that's kind of really close to being right over the top of their head, but it's got a little bit of an angle back. That's ideal. Positions in theaters don't always work this way, but we do the best we can to make it look the way it's supposed to. And if you're looking at the side view, then you can see our front lights are up at a 45-degree angle from our subject, and our backlight is at a very steep angle, hitting the back of their head. So the next time you go into a high school theater or you're looking at lighting design, this is the most basic design concept there is for lighting design in theater. When you go into a theater and you look up at the catwalk and you're standing on the front edge of the stage, you're probably going to look at roughly a 45-degree angle. That's where we mount the catwalk or the front lighting position because of Stanley McCandless's design principles. And so if we go from there, what we wind up doing is we're putting the stage into areas. So A, B, C, D, F on that plot right there. Typically, McCandless design plots are going to be in odd numbers so that we can always have a center zone because everybody likes to be center stage in the front. So a lot of times you'll have 3 areas like this. If you don't have a lot of inventory, you don't have enough money to supply the Performing Arts Center or whatever with a lot of fixtures, they'll do 3 areas wide and 3 areas deep. Sometimes we'll go 5 areas wide, depending on how big the stage is. We'll go 7 areas wide. But again, always an odd number. And you can see from this diagram, if you imagine the light placement as the front of house catwalk or that front of house position, we're basically 45 degrees off of area B. And then as we went to area C, we'd slide that whole triangle over. And as we went to area A, we'd slide that whole thing over. So we'd have 2 lights at each position. Does it always work out? It does not. Sometimes you've got a 60-degree angle over here and a 30-degree angle over here. It still works. It's just not as quote unquote perfect in the McCandless design world. It's not, this is not hard and fast kind of design rules. This is just what we strive for, is to have 45s like this and 45s like this. From there, Stanley McCandless talked about changing the color of the lights. So we have a warm light on one side and a cool light on the other side. And the reason we do that is to give more interesting shadows on somebody's face. So when you light somebody from this side with a warm light and this side with a cool light, you get shadows. So if I turn the warm light on only, this side of my face will kind of be in shadow. And if I barely bring up that cool light, it will give a cool kind of glaze over my shadows and still have that warm front light. So think of it like warm white and cool white. You don't usually do front light in deep saturated colors. They're usually kind of natural colors. But we talk about this all the time in undergraduate classes, in high school theater classes. We talk about it with graduate students. Like I used to work in higher ed, and this is what we taught. You have to learn how to do McCandless lighting design so that you know what rules you can and can't break. Because some lighting positions just look terrible on a stage, and some of them are done for specific effects. Like I talk about how gross footlights are, but there are specific effects that you use footlights with. So there are lots of different positions on the stage that we don't really get out of the candle and the oil-based burner kind of world, but our basic McCandless plot looks like this. It's 2 lights and a backlight. From there, you can add more backlights. You can add more front lights. You can add a top light, so straight down on somebody's head. You can add side fills, which are really fun to play with. You can add direct side fills. They have direct front light, and I'll show you some of that in just a moment. But all of these positions are they're just all over the place. It's wild, and you can figure out, like I said, you figure out what rules you can break to achieve specific design principles. So looking at it from this slide is all about lighting angles. And again, if you look at the left side, we've got 2 front lights at 45-degree angles, and we've got a side light. The other half of this is backlight, top light, front light, flat front light, and uplight. So what does that look like on a subject, right? So if we go to the next slide, flat front light there at the top, number 1, does that look like anything you've ever seen before? I mean, to me, it looks like every picture I took in 1998 with a paper Kodak disposable camera. But the flash is on the same level as the lens, so it's a dead flat front light, and it looks kind of boring. If you look at number 2, there's 1 light on, and that's at a 45-degree angle. You see how the chin right here is in shadow a lot more. Which one of those looks more interesting to you, right? And then number 3 has got both of those front lights on at the same level. So it still looks more interesting than that flat front light, but it's not quite as shadowy as just a single front light. So you can kind of see how adding and taking away a little bit of light will really affect your subject. Side light on number 4, I absolutely love side light. I used to like to work a lot in dance lighting, and dancers, since they aren't acting, you're essentially just highlighting their movements. You can use just straight side light on dancers because it looks really, really good. And typically what we do with that is do completely opposite colors. Like we'll have a blue light on one side and a red light on the other side. So that when somebody stands in the middle of them at their center line of their face, you'll almost see a white line down their face just because of the lights converging, because light is an additive color mixing effect. So I love side light so much. I can talk about side light all day. And then number 5 is top light. So that's just straight down light. And you see how it's kind of showing some very odd shadows in the face, but it's really, again, really interesting. And again, by varying the levels on all of your other lights in your McCandless plot, you can achieve this shadowing effect. And then on number 6, you're seeing backlight. Backlight is really, really important in the film, TV industry and the theatrical industry, because without backlight, person or an object or whatever you're lighting on stage looks like it's 2-dimensional, looks like it's blending into the background. You're only lighting it from the front. Everything behind it is being lit from the front. It looks flat. As soon as you add backlight, that halo effect makes whatever you're lighting up pop out from the stage. It gives it a 3rd dimension. You see it kind of come out. It's really, really cool when you have somebody do that. And uplight, again, like I said, footlights, I hate them, but they do give an interesting effect. It looks otherworldly, doesn't it? I was talking about there was a show that I did when I was in college that's all about robots that take over the world eventually. And the last scene that the director wanted to do was these robots on the front of the stage with guns, and they freeze in this kind of really creepy looking pose. and the lights fade down around them, and that's the end of the show. And I put when I was doing the lighting design, I put 3,000-watt Fresnels in the front of the stage and put green gels in front of them, so that as we faded down all the lights, the green lights came up, and you were left with this kind of really creepy green uplight on these robots holding guns. It was really a really good effect, and I loved it so much, and I think about it all the time. But anyway, that's what we do in theatrical lighting design. That's about all I've got for you. I had that quote right there. I saw this the other day. It's a quote by Richard Pilbrow: "The right light in the right place is worth 100 lights anywhere else." And Richard Pilbrow was a really well-known, he just passed away maybe a month ago, something like that. But he was a really, really well-known theatrical design consultant. He worked, and he actually started the company Theater Projects. But he was really, really well respected, and he has a lot of really good quotes like this. So that's all I got for you guys. Anybody got questions?
Once again, feel free to come on mic to say your question, or you can put it in the chat.
Good answer. I love talking about this stuff. We talked about doing another one of these presentations that kind of delves a little bit more into theatrical control systems and a little bit deeper into theatrical lighting and power control and all that. So I love talking about this stuff. So if you guys are interested in that, let Brian and Anna know.
Thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful.
Sure.
I've run into a couple really old stages lately, and they seem, like some of your first pictures, they have that lighting at the front of the stage.
Yep.
What are those called? I think it's a French
Footlights.
word. Footlights.
There probably is a French term for it, but most everybody calls them footlights. Do they have the ones that are in like a box that flip up?
No,
That's kind of an old school way to do it.
Sure. This was usually not quite so fancy. It was mostly just aluminum channel with sockets in it, behind sort of a shield.
Yep. Yeah. If they're hung, those are border lights. If they're on the floor, they're just footlights. I'm sure there is. I remember there's some kind of weird French term for those, but I can't remember what it is.
I have some work happening up in Evergreen. We're redoing a stage that's up there, and they even seem to have some channel lighting in the eaves. I think there's sockets in it. I think they've abandoned it. It seems like it would be fun to bring it back.
Yeah, I love that stuff. There's I think the Orpheum Theater in Memphis has that kind of socket around the opening of the stage. A lot of the old kind of vaudeville style theaters and the opera houses that were built out in the Wild Wild West had that kind of bulb thing in various locations because it just looks really cool. Yeah, it looks bad as a theatrical lighting device, but it looks really cool for like the aesthetics of a theater.
Right. Like somehow improve everything, and then maybe find a way to keep the historical legacy stuff.
Yeah, and there's actually a handful of manufacturers that make those kind of devices, so you can put that channel with screw-in bulbs, and they'll do LEDs that are controllable from those. That you can get in multiple colors, or you can get in simply in white. Marquee lighting looks really cool.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Are there any other questions from anyone? As a reminder, this will be uploaded to our website in just a few days. I'd like to thank you, Jared. We've never had a rendition of an ABBA song during a tech talk, so this was the first. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Hopefully we'll see you at future tech talks and IES events in the future. You can go to our website or follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to get all of the latest details, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good day.
Guys. Great job, Jared. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks.